are focusing on the Mekong because that's where we have the most capacity and the better opportunity. That's the one that is the most relevant to you because Mekong is Cambodia, Cambodia is in Mekong. So that's what I'm going to present today. We have, in the meantime, had a fourth theme coming in, which is food, which is also very relevant to this. So that's basically what this is about. It's Resilient Mekong River Program and how relevant it is to Cambodia. We are in the process of developing this, so it is a work in progress. So it's a good time to present to you because you can tell us what doesn't work, if it makes sense to you, feedback, whatever it is, as long as you stay polite, whatever you think, I'm happy to hear. So what is the challenge we're trying to fix? We have the Living Planet Index, which is our key reference at WWF. We do this every second year. We look at the loss of vertebrate, freshwater, biodiversity abundance in the planet, in the trends. And a good way to put it is by biome. If you put it by terrestrial, marine, and freshwater, you can see what the situation is. And you can see very clearly that we are losing freshwater species much faster than terrestrial and marine, which doesn't mean that we should stop doing freshwater, doing terrestrial and marine, but the sixth mass extinction is happening in the rivers and wetlands before elsewhere. So it's a priority for us. You've probably all seen the Mekong Forgotten Fishes report that we launched earlier this year. One of our biggest success. We got 1 billion hits, communication people. So that's a big one. We have the Mekong, which is one of the 3 top large rivers in the world for fish biodiversity. In terms of, if you look at fish biodiversity per area or per length of river, it is #1. You should also be proud here in Cambodia. You have the largest wildlife migration on the planet. 5 billion fish move every year on the Tonle Sap. So more than Africa and more than elsewhere. So it's important. You also have the most productive inland fisheries in the world. The Mekong produces 15% of the world fish on the planet. That includes marine, 15% including marine. So but all of this is at risk, and that's what we need to protect. We see rivers through its different values, and often those values are hidden. They are cultural values. Cambodia has very strong values that are cultural values that are associated with rivers. They are recreational values. We often see the food value of rivers. The rivers produce food. The river produce fish, and fish is a non-consumptive user of the water. The fish is in the water. You catch it. You have the fish, but the water is still here, and it doesn't use land. If you lose this, you need water and you need land to replace, so you lose forest, and it has impact on them. Floodplains are 8 times more productive than any other land, so those values are very important. So biodiversity, obviously, and I should mention 10% of the biodiversity species are freshwater, but 40% of the species need fresh water. So all of those are the values of rivers that we often don't look. But the key one that we discuss here is for climate adaptation. We believe that a connected river is the most cost-effective way to protect people from droughts, from floods, and from storms. So that's what we're going to try to unpack. Next slide, not working. I cannot get the next slide. Okay, there we are. Thank you. So I don't know what you did, but thanks. Biometrics. Yeah, maybe the. So the Mekong that we were observing 20 years ago is very different to the Mekong today. There's key challenges to the Mekong. There's very significant land use change. There are alteration of the flows. There's fragmentation of habitat, dramatic loss of sediment, and more extreme weather patterns, which have direct impact on connectivity of species, which affects more widely the biodiversity and is pushing species into extinction. We have changes in nutrients and sediment flows that have impact on food security, that have impact on wider dimensions of livelihoods. The riverbed is changing very significantly. Lots of riverbank erosion and the river is deeper. Those translates into private sector increases loss and risks, and we are more exposed to the impact of disasters. So that is a very different picture to what we had 20 years ago, and the trends are not good. The Mekong River Commission is very good at gathering data and gathering understanding, and every 5 years they publish the State of the Basin report, which gives an overview with key indicators of the big trends. So what they say is that the socio-economic trends are good. They have the socio-economic development has made some progress and people are better off, but this has been done at a very high cost for the environment, and all the environmental indicators are going down in the red. Interesting to see the second one, water quality and sediment conditions. The Mekong, compared to large rivers on the planet, and certainly in Asia, has relatively good water quality. And not only it's good, but the trends are improving. So that's good. But still, the indicator is going down because the sediment, dramatic decline in sediment is so bad that it drags the indicator down. So very important for us to understand this. Now let's go and see the issue from a disaster risk perspective. So first of all, and that's the World Bank saying it, the impact of climate change is going to materialize through water mainly, 90% according to World Bank. So the disasters happen, the climate disasters are water disasters mainly. Those two graphs come from the UN World Meteorological Organization, which is the UN body that measures. And first, in terms of death and economic losses, the key disasters are droughts, floods, and storms. Those are the key ones, and floods being the most expensive and the most deadly now. In the past, it has been droughts for deaths, but this has changed. This is those indicators are good because it's from the 70s, the trends. So on the left, it's the number of deaths that are linked to extreme events. And you can see that the trend is good, and that's good. That on one side, we have more and more occurrence of floods, storms, and droughts, but in the result, we have less people dying from it. And that's very good. But that's mainly attributed to early warning systems. But if you look, and you can feel that, oh, we're solving it, so it's good. But if you look at the second graph, it's putting the exact same data in terms of reported economic losses. And you can see that the trend is not good. So the same disasters are costing more and more to the economies. And that's driving the insurance sector into a war. Swiss Re just published last week that is the 5th year in a row that those disasters, mainly floods, are costing more than 100 billion a year. And this means that it's not sustainable. They got to drive themselves out of business. What does it mean for this region? Yagi hit Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, Myanmar about 1 month ago. Vietnam government did a back of envelope calculation, and in terms of loss and damage, they think it's 3.3 billion, and it's a rapid assessment. That's about 1% of the GDP. They had a drought in the south of the country the first quarter of this year. It's also 2.9 billion, another percent of the GDP. In Thailand, that was hit also. The business association did a rapid also calculation. So just for the business side, 800 million. The country did an assessment for the entire country, the cost of floods, 1.4 billion. So huge figures. And also probably underestimation because it's reported and rough estimation. Myanmar, they don't have those same figure that they have in terms of displacement. So we have hundreds of people, hundreds of thousands of people displaced. That has a huge cost also. Very interesting also is on the right, McKinsey, the consultant, which is a good reputation, but very quite conservative consultancy. They did a study for the city of Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam. And they looked at the direct, so only direct, cost of flooding of 100-year flood to real estate. So it's not indirect, it's only direct. It's not, it's only real estate. It's not infrastructure, it's not letting people go to school, it's not private losses, it's only real estate. And they have a figure in 2020, and it's in billions also, so it's something like 3% of the GDP of the city. But they looked at the cost of the prediction of the same 100-year flood cost in 2020 and 2050. And they see the cost will be up to 10 times higher. So the trend is pretty clear that from that perspective, there will be more and more floods, there will be more and more storms, and they're going to cost more and more. So the infrastructure solution that we have to deal with the floods, building dikes, building dams, doesn't work from that perspective. It's not what is saving lives, and it's expensive to invest in, and it's not working from a macroeconomic perspective. And you tell me, what does it do? Why are you discussing this, Marc? What is the link for a conservation organization? Well, because we're losing the freshwater species faster than any other biome, in 2020, we got scientists and we tried to understand the key reason why we're losing freshwater biodiversity. And we had 6 key reasons. And the first one is that rivers are fragmented. And the second is water quality, which is a non-issue here. Habitat to protect, sand mining and overfishing, invasive species, and again, free-flowing rivers. So it's kind of redundant. So connectivity is the key reason. Here, water quality is not really the reason. So basically, the key reason why we're losing biodiversity in the Mekong is fragmentation. And fragmentation is from dams, dikes, exactly the response to climate disaster that doesn't work from a macroeconomic perspective is the key reason why we're losing biodiversity. So basically, it makes macroeconomic sense. We cannot oppose conservation to development. We have to find a new way to address this in order to solve it. So what is the opportunity for us? This is the Lower Mekong. And in red, we have the population density from 1975 to today, or to 2022. And then after it's a projection to 2030. So you can see, first of all, we call Greater Mekong, but out of the 300 million plus people in the Greater Mekong, a small amount of, there's about 60 million only are in the basin. And they're concentrated in Thailand and southern Vietnam. The rest is pretty low density. And again, that's a projection. So this means that we have an amazing opportunity here. That's where we have the most rainfall, and that's where we have the least population. So runoff work here is the first key way that we can address the exposure to water disaster, to floods, to droughts, and to storms. So that's the work that we will do in Laos, mainly on watershed management, but it's relevant also to the floodplains. But very important also, the key problem in most of the countries, notably the developed economies, is that we have allowed non-floodable activities and floodplains. And once you have people in floodplains, they understand that the state has to protect them. And once you do that, you don't have the space for the floods to expand. And that's why that's the reason why we have damage, that's the reason why it's very expensive. Those places are green. Actually, the red is the projection in the coming 10 years. So it's very rare in a large river in Asia that you have quite functioning floodplains. And the exchanges between the floodplain and the river are still intact. That's what is key for biodiversity, that's what is key for fisheries. And protecting this and building with this and ensuring that we find a model where the people live in the floodplains in a way that accommodates the flood is key. And I think I mentioned it when we were discussing the conservation strategy. Khmer culture is a floodplain culture. The history of the Khmer is the history of living in the floodplains with the floods and valuing the floods. And that's what we need to modernize and find the economic model to modernize. So that's a key opportunity that we should consider as a big part of our work. And I think you have already, because your strategy now has a floodplain component, and that's really good to see and opening great opportunity. And what I tell the Vietnam team is that you can do more to protect the people in the Vietnam Mekong Delta than by protecting the floodplains in Cambodia and protecting the watersheds in Laos and Cambodia than you can do in Vietnam. So you can also consider this and fund this as a trade-off in order to get investments from the businesses that will benefit from this. Going back to the WHO also, those are the information about this number of disasters reported, the deaths and the costs, but distributed between developed economies, economies in transition, and developing economies. So the first graph tells you that the exposure to disasters is much higher in developing economies. So basically, naturally, there's more extreme events. It's just nothing to do with civilization, nothing to do with economy, nothing to do with any decisions by humans. It is naturally what happens. So naturally, you have more disasters, and there will be more and more. So naturally, that's where more deaths occur. But it's the last graph that is interesting. The developed economies have less disasters, but it costs more. If you project this, it means that places like Cambodia, as you develop, the price is going to, the cost of disasters, if you go business as usual, is going to be much higher than in developed economies. And this report from the UN considers that in most of the developed countries, you're going to have between 5 and 20% of the GDP that is going to be absorbed by disasters, disaster destruction, which is not sustainable, absolutely not sustainable. So the program, first the framing. This is very much roadmap 2030. So you've heard through the network that WWF International wants also for us to have more impact and to leverage and to move into collective action, which makes complete sense. And they want to do that by influencing systemic change to the global climate and biodiversity crisis. That's 100% what we want to do. And what we're discussing is much bigger than us. What the slides I presented is WWF cannot do much about it, but we have very strong convening power, and that's what we have to put on the table. That's very much aligned with the key directions of what WWF International wants to do. So fully aligned, fully makes sense. Connected Rivers of Resilience is a program that is hosted by US under the freshwater practice. So there's capacity there. We're working on similar approaches in different places in the world. We're working in Nepal, we're working in Africa, we're working in Europe, huge program in Europe. Less space because in Europe they are in repair mode. Here, we have the opportunity to work more in anticipating to some extent. But the key point here is that there's a home for connected rivers of resilience, so for Resilient Mekong. There's a home at WWF-US in the team there that can support us. Very importantly, also, WWF spearheaded with all the key NGOs working on water and UN agencies. We spearheaded the most ambitious ever global program on protecting fresh water, and we launched it at the COP 2 years ago, led by countries mainly from Africa and Latin America. The objective is globally to protect 150 million hectares of wetlands and to keep 300,000 kilometers of rivers connected. Many countries have signed to it. Many countries in Africa, many countries in Latin America, the key large economy countries, US has signed, Germany has signed, UK has signed, France has signed, Netherlands has signed, Canada, Australia. Big momentum. In Asia, not so many countries, but Cambodia has. So you have a key, so bravo to Cambodia. We're leading the way for the Mekong, leading the way for Asia with Pakistan. Key opportunity because you can link this to that big movement that is brought. So I think that's a good way to attract attention, and there's probably going to be money to it. So GCF just committed $5 million to the secretariat for this to work. So we'll have money to get things started if we need to have representatives from the Cambodia government to engage. That was the key issue. We had a good momentum, good idea, but not the support of the secretariat. This was announced last week at the Diversification Convention. So that's good. And again,
second JCF.
GCF. GCF. So GCF committed $5 million for the secretariat for this to get it globally to work on it. Not for Cambodia, for the world. But Cambodia has signed to it. So Cambodia has a right to it. So we define rivers by connectivity, and we needed a scientific dimension to it. So most water resources people look at water quality, water quantity, which is very relevant, but we look at connectivity. And in order to have this, we published in 2019 a method to explain what connectivity is, which is longitudinal, lateral, and vertical movement of water and sediment. So longitudinal is from upstream to downstream. Lateral is the exchanges between the river and the floodplain, and vertically is the exchange with the groundwater, but also the riverbed incision. This definition is very important to have it as a scientific reference. The paper in Nature that we published with scientists has now gotten 1,300 plus citation, which is a lot. Most papers get 10, so 1,300 means science accepted it, so it's a solid reference. But now we need to demonstrate and to get the public sector and the private sector to buy into it. And the key assumption is that we have to demonstrate that it is cost effective to keep connected rivers, to keep rivers connected as a strategy that is a better option than to build dikes, dams, and to drain wetlands. So if you have worsening water and climate risk, you basically have three options to respond to this. You can have what I call the resist and protect. So basically building dikes, levees, and dams. That's what most people have done. That's what Cambodia has done. That's what Laos has done. The problem is that this, as I mentioned earlier, is the key reason why we're losing freshwater biodiversity. So that's not a good option for us. And on top of it, it doesn't work from a macroeconomic perspective. Then we have what we call retreat. What I call retreat is we really create people. We have alert systems on both relevant crops. That's what I would consider as a social response. It makes sense because it saves lives and it protects livelihoods. But the conservation impact is not clear. Sometimes they may, but it's not really a conservation solution. And then you have active resilience, so you can call it super NBS. It's working with the large-scale natural processes and enhance the systemic resilience to keep the free-flowing rivers, to keep the floods. This has the most conservation impact. So that's what we want to do. So it's not black and white. You cannot say all number one or all number three. It's going to be a mix of all of them. There will always be infrastructure. There will always be some passive retreat, some passive solutions or retreat solution. But what we want is have less of one and two and more of three. That's basically what we are advocating for, which can be put also as change in the era. So from the 70s, what we try to do when we manage rivers is to get the water as fast as possible from the watershed into a dam. You have to as fast as possible from the dam to the river. And what we need to do now is to keep the water longer and the sediment longer into the system, because it's good for biodiversity, but it's good also for livelihoods. And it's also good for agriculture. So basically, this is happening, but we just need to accelerate this. Out of this paper, we have a connectivity index. So basically, we define connectivity, but also we mapped the connectivity situation of the rivers. So we can map the degree of fragmentation and the degree of regulation. The Mekong was a test for this. So in 2012, we did a map of the connectivity status of the Mekong, macro. So red is bad, blue is good. And we did it again in 2022. So we have an evolution, we have a good idea of the evolution. And basically, we have a trend. So in 2012, we could call the Mekong free-flowing. In 2022, not anymore. So we had the border. So this means that the trend is not good, but this means also for the monitoring people that we have a key monitoring tool that is unique, that allows us to measure this. It also allows us to understand that we need work in conservation and work in restoration, both. So if you think global biodiversity framework, target on restoration and target on conservation, we need to do both. When in the developing world, it's mainly restoration. In twisting rivers, it's mainly conservation. So how are we in building this program? We started in 2022, where we got all the countries, including Cambodia. I can't remember who was there from the Cambodia team, but some of your colleagues were there. We looked at what was the desired actions that were needed in river, and what was the existing capacity we had. So each time is a Cambodia flag. It's something that was important for the Cambodia program. It's something that you had something to start from. So we built that just as interactive. So the flags were put by WWF-Cambodia people, so not us. The frame was built also by us discussing. So it was just a way to get a starting point of what we had already, what was the aspiration for growing the program, and what was the comparative advantage of the different offices one to another. So that was a good starting point for us. This is a kind of a synthesis of it, which is good because of all the different places or strategies that we have, we somehow, between the countries, cover all of them somehow. And that shows also the complementarities of different countries. And that's a very good start. But the point is that we started from this. So we took your input and we used it. And we tried to organize it in a way. And I'm here now to feedback how far we are and getting further feedback. So what are we trying to do and how does it fit to the wider work that we do with partners? So first of all, we're not starting from scratch. Those are the key initiatives or projects that we have in the region that we build with. So we have projects that we call enabling conditions, like Mekong for Future, which is building capacities of CSOs and their understanding, access to data, and leveraging. We have the SML project from SDC, which is a water stewardship project, engaged with the private sector. We have the typical conservation work with the Mekong imbalance, the capacity of countries to respond to the GBF and the commitment there. We have EDNA, which you know are also ways of measuring biodiversity, so we know what to conserve, but we have also those larger initiatives on forests and dolphins that are important. And then we have already climate resilient projects that are de facto working on resilience. Initiative like the resilient deltas in the wetlands for Asian floodways, which is also demonstrating the value of wetlands for adaptation. But we have sand mining project, is a climate project on looking at the relation between sand mining and climate resilience. We have the CRXN project, we have the Dutch one for climate, which are, and that's only the regional ones. You have projects in country that I have not listed. Like Laos has a GCF working on the basins and watersheds approach that are all sense. But that's just to say that we're building on something that can continue. So the program approach, that's a very high level theory of change, which is basically saying that if we can demonstrate that the values of connected rivers and the risk of fragmented rivers to leaders in the provinces, national level and regional level, to communities and get them to understand the values of connected rivers, to the business leaders, and they use this in order to influence on the setting and operation of dams, on regulation of sand mining, but also on proofing agricultural transport and flood protection infrastructure. And that affects positively on the flows of water and sediment and the connection with the floodplains. Then we will have systemic resilience at scale. We will protect the key processes that support biodiversity. We'll have more empowered communities, and this will translate into more cost-effective climate adaptation, much more than the business as usual. So that's the logical high-level theory of change. We then organize the same into an operational frame, if you want. So in the middle is the place-based, how we do this on the ground. So the next slide will unpack this. I will tell you there how it is. And the other ones, the outcome 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are the different enablings and different key things and key groups that we need to engage in order to make it happen. So the outcome 1 is really the thought leadership. We have to demonstrate that the science that we have makes sense from an implementation perspective. We have to really engage the different players and get them to understand our theory of change. The 3 is basically to empower the communities and to ensure that we have solutions that work at community level and work at systems, not one or the other, both. And we need to empower them in order to make this happen. So we have to work in close collaboration with communities. That's the only way to make it happen. Outcome 4 is that private sector is the only power that can make this happen in the time frame that we have. They are the players that are going to be impacted as much as they're going to be impacting. They are the players that can really influence. They can lead the corporate advocacy so when, for instance, the textile sector here is 60% of the foreign earnings. They can talk to the Prime Minister much more than we can. But they can also create an umbrella and a protection for outcome 3 for the community net, because the communities, we know the space for communities and for CSOs is shrinking in all the countries in the Mekong. The private sector, if they do understand the value of this entire theory of change, they can support us in implementing. So it's key that we somehow adapt the concept of water stewardship away from only water quality, but to adapt it to climate resilience, and that we get private sector to take on their responsibilities, because often we tell them all of this and they say, yes, but that's public sector, it's not us. But we tell them, wow, you're operating in a country with a weak institutional setting. You cannot on one side have access to affordable labor and use the resources without being responsible. But at the same time, it's logic because you are affecting by something that is bigger than you. So if you don't move into collective action, your future is not there. So we can expose them internationally, but at the same time, we can bring them to the understanding. And they are just starting to understand river. Coca-Cola, for instance, comes to us and they say, well, we're starting to understand the river basin level, and we need more support for this.
And this is the umbrella program, you mean?
That's a program, umbrella program. So it should be the one that puts a lot of what you're doing into perspective, and hopefully that's what we're trying to do. So that we have a better idea of how we can have more impact, but also how we can be more attractive to players, to stakeholders.
And currently we are trying to mobilize different resources to implement under this outcome, right? Yeah,
that's what we have discussed at the PIA shareholders, where all country directors and the regional team and our national office that are supporting us thought that we have too many projects, we're not strategic, there's no clear link between different things that we do. So that's supposed to give more a wider frame for us, so that we have a better understanding of how we work, but also how to be more strategic and being more ambitious, but also being more attractive to large investments, because we are underselling ourselves. That's the logic that we're trying to do. It's not an easy one, but that's basically our aim. That's the task here. And obviously we need policies and we need the finance at scale, which is the question that everybody asks itself. So that's basically promoting NBS, if you want, and making the case for it. But we need to have finance at scale. And we're asking investors to invest in something that has not been. So NBS works if we work it at system scale, but there's never any place in the world where we've done it at scale. Elsewhere, it's basically been too late. So here we have to do it ahead, but it only works if we're doing it at big scale, and we're asking investors to invest on something big that has never been done before. That's the key challenge that we have. That's our huge assumption, and that the big nut to crack. That's what we try to do here.
Very big ambition.
And that is the operation. When you have something big, you need to have an operation and coordination of a program. So that's the outcome. So let's look at outcome 2 now, and basically it's place-based solution. So everything has to be rooted in reality. We have to, this very abstract, we have to root it in reality. There's 6 types of initiative that we need. First one is we need to affect runoff. So we need to work in the upper watersheds. We need to restore the connectivity in between floodplains and tributaries. So the countries that are listed below are the ones that are relevant, and the one with the asterisks are the ones that we can start with. So one is basically forest restoration. So basically, what I'm presenting there is not we're going to start all again. What a lot of the forest restoration work that you've done, you've been promoting it as forest only, and its value to terrestrial biodiversity. It has also, the same work you do has also value for freshwater biodiversity and for resilience, but we don't sell it as such. So we can just add rationale to it and hence, but also there's a GEF and now that we're discussing with the government, where we could also demonstrate this and exchange lessons. So the big part of what that we were doing already in the Eastern Plain that we can enhance, basically. The working and connecting the tributaries and the floodplains and the middle reaches, all the tributaries is something that we need to do. It has some impact, but maybe a bit less than the previous. And we're doing through the CRXN project in Thailand. So we got to test this model, and after we can maybe bring it to Cambodia. A very important one that most people don't see is that the riverbed in Phnom Penh and downstream, and a little bit in Laos, but very much in Cambodia and Vietnam, is losing elevation. It's getting deeper. So the river at Phnom Penh is today 3 meters deeper than 20 years ago. And that's very important because it means that for the same amount of water, the water level is lower. So the water table is lower. So the wells are drier, but also it takes more water to go into the floodplain. And we know that the duration and extent of the floodplain is directly linked to the productivity of the fisheries. If there's less floods, there's less fish. Very clearly, the science is very clear, but biodiversity, the same thing. So we need to find a solution for this. We have worked in Vietnam on this, and we have a solution for this. We have an agreement with the MRC to work on this. This is key, but people are looking at the Tonle Sap and they're saying that the reversal of Tonle Sap happens later, and that is, this is a key explanation. If the river is deeper here, you need more water to reverse the Tonle Sap. And we know that the Tonle Sap doesn't reverse, the fisheries are lower. And also it impacts the exposure to floods to the people downstream from Phnom Penh and in Vietnam. It's huge. And we have led on this. So we're kind of the go-to organization for this. And we have found solutions. We worked with the government of Vietnam. We changed the law. We create tools. So we have a formula that we can bring here and develop here. So we have a solution for this. But it's key for Cambodia. And Cambodia, if it does this, will also have much benefit to the people in Vietnam. So again, something that you can develop and negotiate, but also a way to avoid conflict, because you know the conflict between Cambodia and Vietnam because of the canal. So we don't want conflict. We want solutions. What I call the rock-based gradient channels, which is for you the MFF and the dolphin work. So key rich on biodiversity. It's a very specific, unique feature that has huge conservation benefits. A bit less on the climate resilience, but still it's one of the key ways. And I put the asterisks on Laos because we have a CRXN project in Laos on this. You work on dolphins here, but not on the adaptation. We can explore with in terms of impacts. For me, not from a conservation, but from a climate adaptation, it's not the biggest one. The biggest one is this one. Cambodia has a floodplain that is still connected. During the floods, everything around Phnom Penh up to Vietnam and up to the Tonle Sap is underwater. That's a huge water reserve. It's a natural reserve. We're building dams to make reservoirs, but that is much bigger than any reservoir we can build. And it's protecting the fish. It's the reason why the fish, most of the fish in the Mekong go to the floodplain, spawn, and then come back. If we lose that, we lose the fish and the food, but also you lose the natural expansion of the floods. So if you do lose the floodplains, you will have much more damaging floods here in Phnom Penh and the provinces of Cambodia downstream and in Vietnam. So we have to really find a solution for that. I guess it's a huge opportunity. And that's so again, in your strategy, you have this. So now we have to populate this. But for me, it is in terms of impact and in terms of attracting funding to do adaptation, it's a big opportunity. If you find a model for this, if you find a business model for it through the DFCD, then you have a huge opportunity. And I think we can also revisit a bit the water stewardship from that perspective. Huge opportunity.
When you put the focus country, is mean the focus from the WWF or the
yeah, for our offices. And that's the one where only Cambodia. We can only do this in Cambodia because the Vietnam floodplains are full of people. So we cannot do it. And in Vietnam, it's a specific case. So that's what we do under the resilient and deltas. And that's again, if you want in Cambodia, it's conservation and conservation of floodplains, and in Vietnam, it's restoration of floodplains. In Vietnam, there's people, so you cannot remove the people. So it's much more costly to get water storage, flood storage in Vietnam than in Cambodia. You can find them, and again, it's your ownership. You just have to evaluate rather than injecting it and not take the model from elsewhere that has failed, because if it fails in Cambodia, it will fail even bigger because everything is bigger. So those are the 6 key places that we have to fund. So if we demonstrate the solution for those 6, then we can upscale and we can have impact at scale, because basically NBS works for local, but it works for the system if you reach a certain threshold. And that's a key question for that. How many hectares or how much can we do in 06 so that we have resilience at scale, which means rebuilding natural processes, which means a resilient river without all the costs that we see elsewhere, without investing 20% or 10 to 20% of the GDP to fix disasters every second year. That will be a drag to your economy. So there's alignment with different strategies, so with forests, with food, with resilient delta flyways, and each of the different places where you have an overlap with those strategies. So what do we need to do next? That's very big. It's a huge undertaking, very ambitious, but it's a precedent. Have you all heard about Recharge Pakistan? So Pakistan country has developed a GCF, and they had a catalytic grant. So they got $700,000 that they use to make the case that is very near this, that NBS at scale would have some benefits for biodiversity and for protecting people in economies. They organize a program, they organize a mail and coordination, and with that, they went to GCF with USAID and with Coca-Cola, and they had $80 million. And that $80 million would leverage billions and billions that will not go through our coffers. And so that's the model. Before they did this, everybody saying, well, it's not possible. If WWF Pakistan can do it, WWF Cambodia can do it. So it's the same logic. So that's the precedence, and that's the ambition that we want. We don't necessarily need to go to GCF. GCF is complex and competitive, and actually there's AFD and SUN are developing a water GCF, so it would be a bit redundant and seen as. But we can think of other models. We can find some development agencies, although there's been question mark between USAID, there's been question mark between AFD, but USAID, I was off a call this morning with the US team. It's not going to get money for biodiversity, it's not going to get money for climate. Sorry, please continue. But they will give for protecting businesses. They will give for ensuring peace in the region so that they can continue to do business. So it's just a matter of language. It's AFD. I know France has a 40 billion deficit, so they got a cut on foreign aid. But Germany has no government. But there will be development agency. Maybe Australia may be interested. Philanthropic. Coca-Cola is very interested in this region. They're talking to us on this and on something big. What is very interesting also and promising, we have a global partnership with the International Federation of Red Cross. This is very much disaster relief. They fundraise in a very different way. I used to work with FRC, so what they do often is that on the back of a disaster, they have pledges because they do emergency work. So they do relief, emergency relief, and then after they do preparedness. What we could do is add a third wagon, which is NBS at scale. And IFRC is starting to enter into the NBS. They had a workshop in Kuala Lumpur with all the regional countries. So they're starting to engage and they see the value of us working together. The two brands are very solid, very attractive, and we have complementarities that we can look into. So we can maybe engage at pragmatic level. So we have started a partnership. Raf, that who is on the call, I think is your point person in these discussions. So Raf, I owe you an email. We just had a meeting with them last week, so I'm going to send a message to recap. But we're making progress. I think we would be very attractive going together to calls, or we would also find different funding models. Insurance companies may be interested in investing in this because it makes sense to them if they're strategic. So basically, the idea is to have a catalytic activity, so a small grant that can help us to organize ourselves. The problem is that everybody goes to the network and asks for money, but we can have in-kind exchanges from our colleagues. But basically, that's the idea, to organize this. And Cambodia is the key country for this, because you are the countries that has the opportunity, that has the private sector, and that has the floodplain in your strategy now. So big opportunity there. And I'll end with this, and I like that's in Cambodia also, because those trees are really the image of resilience. They are there in the floods, and you can see how resilient they are, because they cope with a lot, but they're still here. So with that, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Marc.